Yeah,
Right,
we're ready to go.
Going live now.
Right, we're live now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is the September the 17th meeting of the Audit Committee. And welcome to this order to the meeting. I am Councillor Peter Adams, Chairman of the committee, and I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the paper shown on screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number they have already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else, so it is clear who is asking to speak, and as the debate has to be heard by those listening to the auto feed. As chair, I will interpret the council's existing standing orders in the light of the requirements for remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer if we need to make a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask the committee to confirm their presence and any disposable pecuniary interests they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time they speak. This is so that those listening know who is speaking. I'm now going to do a roll call ask for disclosure of pecuniary interests. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included on the register of interests, and leave the meeting prior to that matter being discussed. Right, so I'm now going to read out the committee members by name to check they're here and ask them to confirm if they have any pecuniary interests. So first, myself, Councillor Peter Adams, I have no pecuniary interests. Gerald Daking. Are you here, Gerald?
I'm here, deputation for Brian Williams.
Good.
Have no pecuniary interest.
No pecuniary interest, right. Michael Wood, Councillor Michael Wood.
Present, Chairman, and no pecuniary interest to declare.
Righto. Councillor Chris Mellings. Right, he may be with us later. And Councillor Johan Jones.
Present and no pecuniary interest to declare.
Thank you. I now shall turn to the items on the agenda. Item 1 is apologies. To receive any apologies for absence.
Michelle Dawson, Committee Officer. Apologies have been received from Councillors Brian Williams and Chris Mellings. Councillor Gerald Daking will be substituting for Councillor Williams.
Okay. We have the next item on the agenda is disposable pecuniary interest we've dealt with. So it's on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting held on July the 30th. I need a proposer and a seconder.
Please, Councillor Michael Wood, pleased to propose, Chairman, no alterations or anything to do to question.
Thank you.
Johan Jones.
Johan,
Johan
you second?
seconded, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right. Before we go to the votes, I've had from Councillor Brian Williams, who's not here, 2 queries. Paragraph 89.5. A member commented that it would be useful to have a table which set out the cost, savings and efficiency of each of the programmes. The Director of the Workforce and Transformation agreed to provide this. Could I ask Kerry, has that been done?
No.
Kerry Plavsky, Head of Audit Chair. It hasn't been done. I've had some communication with Michelle, and these figures are being pulled together and they'll be provided to audit members in due course.
Thank you. And the second one was paragraph 90.5B, that's the top of page 3, that the chair and head of audit meet with Councillor Vasmar to discuss concerns to assess whether a further report to the committee was required. Now, the head of audit, Kerry Pulaski, and myself did have that meeting. Would you like to comment, Kerry?
Thank you, Chair. Kerry Pulaski, head of audit. In conclusion from the meeting, what we said we'd do is we'd revisit the whistleblowing policy, and we'll do this at the December committee. But in advance of that, I'll circulate it to members, including Councillor Vasmir, to take on board any improvements or any issues that members might want to highlight.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. And paragraph 95.3, which the last few words were "and report back to members." So that's on page 6, paragraph 95.3. Has that been reported back? I'll ask the head of audit, Kerry Pulaski, again.
Sorry, Chair. Head of Audit, Kerry Pulaski. This has been queried with directors. I think James is online and may have a further update for you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, James. Could you introduce yourself and your title before you speak? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. James Walton, Council's Director of Finance, Governance and Assurance. So the query was in relation to directorate objectives for each director, identified as part of the annual governance statement, and then obviously with the shift with the previous chief executive leaving and interim chief executives being in place, were those objectives being followed up? So I have raised that with the joint interim chief executives, and I've now had confirmation that now that Andy Begley, once Andy Begley has been formally appointed by council, he'll be formalising approaches for identifying and managing directorate objectives. In the meantime, however, those informal conversations have continued.
Okay, thank you. So I have this the minutes proposed and seconded. Do I have anyone objecting or abstaining? No. Okay, I declare that the minutes accepted. Then we now go.
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Pardon? Sorry,
Gerald Aiken. I'm abstaining because I wasn't at this meeting.
All right. Okay, thank you, Gerald. Okay, with that, they're still accepted by the vote with one abstention. Okay, we move on to agenda item 6 now. Risk management annual report. Responsible officer is Angela Beachy. Is Angie here?
Yes, I am, Chair, yes.
Oh, you are. Right, would you like to present your report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Angela Beachy, Risk Insurance and Resilience Manager for Shropshire Council. As a risk and business continuity emergency planning team, we can certainly say we've had a busy year. No deal Brexit, 2 storms, 2 severe flooding events, response to COVID-19, and we're now back to Brexit again, whilst still dealing with COVID-19. The team has worked tirelessly to respond to all of these incidents whilst maintaining delivery of the day job to the best of our abilities. And I am pleased to report that the audit review of risk management this year has again identified the assurance level as good. With regards to the strategic risks, the quarterly review of the strategic risks have taken place, and despite the heavy workloads for all staff, people did respond to the request for updates on the risk profiles, and June's meeting with the individual risk owners, who are the directors, was undertaken virtually but did work really well. So at the June strategic risk review, there were 18 strategic risks, which comprise 13 high, 3 medium and 2 low. With regards to operational risks, all these risks are now on a SharePoint site, so the risk owners have access to update these risks at any time, not only during the biannual review which is carried out. And we are currently working with IT colleagues to develop Power BI reporting to allow us to monitor and report on the operational risks with live data at any time. The project risks, we continue to support projects with their risks, and we're also moving these onto SharePoint so that we can, as a risk team, can monitor on these and report on live data. With regards to business continuity, we've faced many challenges and we have supported service areas to respond to COVID and also keep key service areas functional. We did have some audit committee training last week and we explained many of the things we'd undertaken in that audit training. But to recap, some of the areas we've been involved is we chaired a business continuity working group which was met to respond to COVID, which met twice weekly, reporting up to directors with key issues for decisions. We were monitoring absences to ensure we could maintain service delivery. We looked at how we could cope with a reduced service provision, and we also undertook a workforce skills questionnaire. So we had confirmation of what skills we had within the workforce. Service reinstatement, we worked closely to that, monitoring and ensuring any services that were reopening had directors' approval and were COVID safe. To Shire Hall attendance, we are monitoring this to ensure COVID safety and also adherence to any other regulations in force. And we already had tactical plans in place for HR, finance and assets. But during COVID, we've introduced tactical plans for adult social care and children's. Just as this is a wider council response, we needed specific plans in place. So a lot of work's been undertaken by the team to support the council in its response to COVID. Part of the team now is emergency planning, who have been equally as busy. Their response is more working with the local resilience forum and partners to respond to various incidents when they occur. And following any incident, there are always debriefs and lessons learned, and these are being worked through at the moment, and plans will be reviewed and amended accordingly. With regarding to training, it's important to ensure that training does continue, especially when plans and procedures change as a result of incidents, and we have managed to continue our training programme throughout the year. With regards to the external work we do, one disappointment we have had is that we were unable to hold our first Shropshire Resilience Conference, which was due to be held in May. This was obviously postponed due to COVID, but we have rescheduled this for May 2021 and hope to be able to secure the same speakers who we had lined up for the event. I would like to just pass on congratulations to Jane Cooper, as she's now taken over chair of the Midlands Alarm Steering Committee. The Alarm is the National Risk Management Association. So on that, I would like to ask members to accept the position as set out in the report. Okay,
righto. Thank you, Angie. And I'm sure that the members of the committee would ask you to pass on congratulations to Jane for her new task there. Could I ask you? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Could I ask you one question? I think it just needs a bit of elaboration. On page 13, 6.5.3. We've had COVID and all the rest of it, and we've seen that the work you put in has helped the council not to collapse and keep going and do whatever. But you've got the last sentence there. This group has also led on the COVID-safe reinstatement of services that were ceased as a result of lockdown measures. Can you expand upon the brief of the reinstatement and the sort of areas it actually covers and the things you're looking at?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So Angela Beachy, Risk Insurance and Resilience Manager. That's obviously through COVID, there were certain areas that had to be locked down and closed down. These were primarily in the leisure areas, so swimming pools, libraries, sports centres, they were all closed down. So because they were closed down for a specific period, when government allowed us to start to reopen them, we obviously had to make sure that that was done in a COVID safe way, and that those businesses that we wanted to be reinstated fitted in with the Shropshire Council's future plans. So the arrangement that was put in place was that any service that wanted to be reinstated had to come to the Business Continuity Group with a report basically giving the reasons why they wanted to reinstate. We then took that up to directors, who were able to give a decision in principle that they were happy for that service to be reinstated. Following that decision in principle, risk assessments were completed and building reopening works were completed as well. And then assurance was given by health and safety and the asset managers to confirm that actually all the work that had been undertaken by that service was COVID safe, and they were satisfied that the buildings could be opened. Once we had that confirmation from Business Continuity Group, we then went back to directors and were able to give them assurance that all the COVID related works had been carried out, and we were satisfied that directors could give permission for that service to be reinstated. And on that basis, directors were then able to confirm that that particular service area could be reinstated. But as I said, mostly it was around leisure services, libraries, etc.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Joan Jones wishes to speak. Joan? Better unmute, Joan.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
God forbid we appear to be on the verge of a second spike in coronavirus. How prepared are we if this should happen?
So Angela Beachy, Risk and Resilience Manager. I think the things that we actually put in place to respond to the first wave of COVID, we have some really robust policies in place and procedures that really capture the information that we need to be able to make real-time decisions to ensure that we can continue to deliver our services. So those are already now in place, which means that we can absolutely put our attentions to ensure that we are responding in a robust way. We're not going through that process of putting these processes in place. They are already there. So I think we feel that we are in a better place to respond. All the meetings that were held regularly, now they've been reduced to say once a week when they might have been twice a week or every single day. They've been held in people's diaries so that they know that should the second wave come, then we've already got regular meetings in diaries that people know that they have to put preference to. We're looking at obviously all the plans of if we have to respond to an outbreak. We have an outbreak response group that is in place that can then actually respond as soon as we get those calls and information about a potential outbreak. So I think we are in a good place, but obviously it will still be a challenge to the council to continue to deliver services and respond to a second wave of COVID if it comes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got two councillors wishing to speak. So first, Councillor Michael Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Michael Wood. I think it's first of all incumbent on us, Chairman, to congratulate Angela and her team on achieving a good rating yet again for the second year. It may even be more, but certainly for the second year, and that is commendable. And of course, the challenges that we've faced in the last 12 months, and we cannot forecast the future, so we don't know what is facing us, except to the fact that, as Angela has just explained, that all the background work and all the groundwork has been undertaken. I was heartened also to hear Angela state that we were hoping to be operating in the future with real-time data and not that which is historical. I have a suspicion, Angela, that as you state in 6.5.1, that this year is going to continue to present you with some challenges, and I'm sure that we can be reassured that we're in a good place to respond. So, Chairman, having said that and awaiting Gerald to speak also, I'd like to move that we accept the report.
Okay, thank you. Right, and now I have Councillor Gerald Dakin wishes to speak. Gerald?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. Going back to 6.5.3, the Business Continuity Group, not all swimming pools are yet open. Is that the same for sports centres as well? And how do we find out when they're likely to be open?
Angela Beachy, Risk Insurance and Resilience Manager. I think the majority, sorry, was it libraries and sports centres, did you say? Or, sorry, Gerald?
The swimming pools.
Swimming pools. The swimming pools are, whenever we open any other building and any service, our primary decision and our primary task is to ensure that it is COVID safe, and that's the responsibility we have to members of the public. With swimming pools, we know that some of them, with the COVID restrictions that we have and the air movement, etc., within swimming pools, that we do have difficulty and work does need to be undertaken on some of the swimming pools. So I think that is, we're not going to be opening any swimming pools where we can't say that we are totally COVID safe. So I think there are a few swimming pools that aren't yet open for those reasons, but I know that they are being worked on. But I think primarily, as a council, our responsibility is to members of the public to ensure whatever service we reopen is safe and the building is safe for them. And if there are delays opening buildings, then that will be the reason, is that we are ensuring that they are COVID safe.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. So we've had this. This is the chairman, Councillor Adams. we've had the recommendation proposed, and I will second it. So, do I have anyone opposing it, or do I have anyone who wishes to abstain from the vote? No. Well, thank you, Angie. And can you tell your team that we think this risk analysis work that you put in over the years, but particularly this year, has paid dividends in full? And can you thank your teams for us?
I will do. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We now go on to agenda item 7, annual Treasury report 2019 to 20. And James, do you wish to speak on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief introduction. So this is James Walton, the Council's Director of Finance, Governance and Insurance and Section 151 Officer. So the annual Treasury report for 2019 has been provided. So this is the 2019-20 financial year. So this is looking back over the previous financial year. This report was taken to Cabinet last week and will be taken on to Council. But as part of the SITFA Treasury Management Code, there's a requirement that we have a nominated committee within the council that review and scrutinise and consider these reports, and the audit committee is that nominated committee for Shropshire Council. So each year in February, the Treasury strategy is approved. That was approved for the 2019-20 financial year back in February 2019, and then a mid-year report was taken through to Council in December 2019. So this report then basically summarises what's happened over the that financial year and brings it back so that it can be compared to that original strategy and that mid-year update. In terms of the summary position, the internal Treasury team outperformed their investment benchmark. So they outperformed it by 0.42%, which doesn't sound a lot on its own, but nevertheless is considerably above the benchmark, and is for the last 3 years that it has been the returns have been above the benchmark by 0.32% per annum. So the team are comfortably outperforming the investment returns that would be expected of them, but in terms of absolute cash return this year, an additional 3.75 million was delivered by the Treasury team, but the majority of that was in relation to the MRP provision, the minimum revenue provision, which is around assumptions around borrowing, some of which didn't happen in the way that was originally expected, and that therefore delivers a significant reduction in cost and therefore an increase in income on that basis. So within the report, we set out in section 8 our borrowing position. We take all our advice from Link Asset Services. They provide us with detailed treasury management advice in all areas. Section 9, we talk about debt rescheduling, and it's just to confirm the committee to the committee that there no debt rescheduling was undertaken in 2019-20. This is basically due to the premium that's charged should we wish to effectively cash in any existing borrowing and then replace it with cheaper borrowing. We have to pay a premium, which therefore makes it financially untenable to actually to undertake that. And then finally, just to point out in section 12, it just talks about our compliance with the Treasury limits and the potential indicators. So all of those indicators and limits set out in the Treasury strategy have all been met, and those are set out in the appendices to the report. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay. Right. Do you have any questions or comments from the members of the committee?
If I may, Chairman, yes.
Yes, Michael. Yes.
I seem to have seen this through Cabinet, of course, James. All in all, in terms of history, it's a very satisfactory report in so many ways, especially that where the Treasury team have outperformed. Of course, always at the back of our mind now is whilst this is very satisfactory, is what it's going to look like this time next year. I just did pick up again something in the report about debt rescheduling, and of course this is something that we've I think talked about any number of audit meetings going back into the far distant past. It's always something that we've looked at quite hard. I seem to recall that we used to get a table or some kind of information regarding where debt restructuring may just have been advantageous to us, but I'm assured that as in 9.1 that there is no option or no availability for us to in actual fact restructure any debt. I am correct, I think, James, to say that we did used to have some kind of a table, and I'm sure when you respond you'll confirm that. So if I can just repeat myself, Chairman, all in all, good report, and all at the back of our minds again will be what this is going to look like this time next year, in which case, Chairman, I'm pleased to note the recommendations. Thank you. Okay, thank you. As any other member of the committee wishes to speak? No, right. Well, I'll propose the recommendations on the recommendation on page 17 of the report,
which is members are asked to accept the positions set out in the report. Do I have a seconder for that?
I thought I'd propose it actually, Chairman, but
Sorry.
Could James just clear the point about the fact that we used to get some kind of a table on rescheduling? It may have been a little while back as memory fades as we go on a bit further, but I seem to recall us having a more detailed look at that particular item as set out in 9.1 in the past. But I'm pleased to second or propose as you wish.
Right, you propose and I'll second, and James can comment.
Okay. I'm happy to pick that up, Chair. So, Councillor Wood is correct. So it's James Walton here, Council's Director of Finance. Councillor Wood is absolutely correct. In terms of that debt rescheduling, we have looked at it. We have looked at the premium that relates to individual loans based on their proposed maturity and their fixed rate of interest. You would have seen those most probably during the Treasury Management training sessions that we have. That's where we tend to go into that level of detail. They wouldn't normally form part of this report, so it's not that we're not providing that information anymore, it's just that it's provided in a slightly different forum. In terms of the Appendix A, however, to the report, that does show the existing debt maturity profile, and so in terms of debt rescheduling, you can do it effectively on an informal basis. So as debt matures, as it reaches its premium, so as it reaches its maturity and effectively gets paid off, you can then replace it with lower interest rate debt going forward. However, as Appendix A demonstrates, there is very little debt to be repaid over the next kind of 8-9 years, and it's only really when we get into the 2030s that significant levels of debt would be paid off, and therefore that might be a time where we'd be looking to actually replace that debt with new borrowing. But obviously that's 10 years in the future, so it's difficult for me to make any firm commitments in relation to that. Thank you, Chair.
If I may, Chairman, given the low interest rates at the moment, James, I mean, they are, I suspect, absolutely at rock bottom, even though the Public Works Loan Board have increased their interest rate slightly. I'm just making the comment that presumably there's absolutely no mileage in this whatsoever for us to have a look at this, and presuming that you're already so doing. I have to say that the print on Appendix A is leaves a bit desired with my aged eyes.
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair. I do apologise for the some of the printing. To be fair, is very, very small on that. However, the key points within the chart are reasonable. You can get the detail from the chart, if not from the descriptions at the top. I suppose the point is that we are cash rich, in the sense of, that doesn't mean that we've got our revenue budget is particularly strong, or our capital budget is particularly strong, but in terms of the cash that's sat in the bank at any particular point in time, that's at the moment is detailed in the report at around £157 million. So that's a significant level of cash that we are depositing on a basis of up to 1 year. If we look to take advantage of borrowing while it is low, all we would be doing is increasing that 157 million cash flow to an even bigger figure, and then even at the low rates of PWLB, if we're making returns of less than 1% on that cash, it would actually be costing the local authority money, no matter how cheap that borrowing is. We would only look to borrow when we are undertaking significant capital expenditure, and that capital expenditure cannot be accommodated within the cash balances. Our cash balances are high because of the Section 106 monies, the SIL monies, the various reserves and capital receipts and whatever, which are due to be spent over the next few years. But because they haven't been spent today, that cash is effectively sat there. Added to that, things like the COVID grants, the business grants, all of these initiatives. I mean, business grants alone was £91 million that just came straight into our account, and we've been trying to get that money out to businesses, and the majority of that has gone, but there's still a residue of that which will be claimed back by the government at some point in the future. So all of those cash figures and balances are sat there effectively within our bank account. So on that basis, we would just be costing the authority if we looked to try and take advantage of those low borrowing rates at the moment. The opportunity cost of borrowing before we need it would be significant.
Councillor Michael Wood again. Thank you for that, James. On Appendix A, I actually thought that line across the top was something to do with the printer, because it is so indistinguishable as being anything that's meaningful. The dates along the bottom are just about clear, and for any descriptions across the top, I'm sorry, it fails again my ageing eyes, but thank you very much for the explanation, James. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. It may well be that James needs to make a capital purchase of a large number of powerful magnifying glasses for aging eyes amongst councillors.
Except
I don't know. Right. Does any other councillor have any questions for James on this report? Okay, it has been proposed and seconded. So does anyone vote against the proposal? Anybody abstaining from voting? Then we accept the recommendation and we go on to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit performance and revised annual audit plan 2020 to 21. And I ask the head of audit to introduce herself and present this item.
Thank you, Chair. It's Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. Members have in front of them the Internal Audit Performance and Revised Audit Plan 2020-21. I can report that 35% of the revised plan has been completed, and we're now in a position to look to the future. Due to the impact of COVID, there has been a significant adjustment to the planned audit activity. The report proposes significant revisions in the coverage of planned activity for Shropshire Council, with a reduction of 643 days. Changes to the planned activity reflect adjustments in both risks and a reduction in available resources for pure audit work, given the impact of COVID on both the service and the council. The changes have been discussed with and agreed by the Section 151 officer. I'm not going to take you through all the detail, but just highlight the salient points. So, if I set a bit of context, we've had auditors identified as having appropriate skills, seconded to support business continuity arrangements, grant applications, issue personal protective equipment, the coordination and allocation of that, and to backfill key service areas. As a result, I've had to adjust the original plan, and 7.3 on page 34 gives you some of the detail behind the adjustments and the thinking behind that as we've assessed the risks. So the majority of the allocations has been built in for continued support to COVID, and that support so far, and that was around 640 days. I can confirm that we'll complete all external contracts. We've prioritised those for completion, and also we've been asked to do an extra 70 days, and this provides a level of income for the service and for the council. We've seen the secondment of an auditor to finance, and this helps them continue their professional portfolio, and it's part of our training process that we put new auditors and accountants through. During COVID, there's been changes and new initiatives, and as a result, we've built in grant work and budget management. We've also seen the implementation of a digital mailroom and have supported the control mechanisms for those. In terms of fraud and advisory contingencies, we've actually reduced those to reflect activities to date, and so that's where we've offset some of the savings. Looking to auditing schools, we're proposing themed audits And this is because we still need a level of assurance across the finance areas within schools without impacting on their resources further, because they're seeing a lot of pressures in managing the COVID systems in their environments. COVID's given us time to look at our data analytics, and what this means is we can download large amounts of data from key financial systems and help with data cleansing and quality, and also this will help us with our sampling and providing assurance going forward. So we'll get smarter at this. And where we've got audits where there's been fundamental recommendations and they're due for follow-up, we're actually speaking to managers about the impact of COVID on their resources and whether or not they've had time to implement their improvement plans at the pace they were expecting to before COVID. Where this has slowed down, we'll adjust our scopes accordingly, so we don't go in and tell them what they already know. And key, we're starting our cyber risk assessment in the next few weeks. This is important, especially given the increased remote working that we're all seeing ourselves involved in. There are some audits I'm also proposing not to do this year because we have a level of confidence from the business. One of these is the strong risk management environment that we find ourselves in. And you've just had the report from Angie. We've had some information at the training sessions that went a little bit more granular into the detail. And so as a result, we're doing very light touch with this. There's a self-assessment that we've run through. We won't be doing a full audit on that. And there's some reduced time spent on training and professional day release to offset some of the pressures elsewhere. I did include in the report as well from paragraph 7.4 on a more detailed example of the audit team's response in supporting the council administering the government's COVID business support grants. But I would say we were part of a robust cross-party working team, and since the introduction of the scheme, grants have been issued as quickly as possible whilst reducing the risk of fraudulent applications. To date, there have been 3 known fraudulent applications where payments were released, but the council has made full recovery on all 3 applications, and these cases have been reported to the police and the government task force that are specifically looking at grant-related fraud. Some of the data and the stats behind our delivery so far start to appear from paragraph 7.8. So there you've got the breakdown of our 17 final reports and proportionately where they are in relation to audits we've not started. 7.9, the graph shows you and demonstrates the areas that we've done some audit testing in to provide you with the assurances in the report, and the detail of which is in 7.10. When you look at 7.11, the pie chart there, it shows the proportion of good and reasonable assurances against unsatisfactory and limited in a very quick to recognise pictorial graph, as do the recommendations in 7.12. And there again, you can see the split of significant versus requires attention recommendations. What I would say, good or reasonable assurances are accounting for about 42% of the opinions delivered to date. That's obviously offset by a corresponding increase in limited and unsatisfactory assurances, but of to note is the increase in unsatisfactory assurances. Appendix A in Table 3 does give members greater detail of these assurances, and also in paragraph 717, the fundamental recommendations that have been identified are also highlighted to members, and it's always useful for members to look at the fundamental recommendations, the unsatisfactory and limited audits, to consider if there's any areas you would like brought back to a further committee in terms of managers giving you updates of assurances and improvements in these areas prior to any future audit work. In terms of audits added value as well, we've managed to support the response to COVID. We've also attended and challenged various project boards and improvement groups in the areas of digital transformation and direct payments. And we've reviews various processes in support of grants around infection control, flooding, as well as the COVID ones mentioned earlier. So we've added quite a bit of value as well. Direction of travel, whilst we're only partway through the year, the number of low assurance levels, 58%, is significantly higher than the outturn for 2019-20, which was 36%. Members should note that only a proportion of the plan has been completed to date, and so the opinions include the completion of some of the main financial system audits from 19-20. So we've still got work to balance this out, but that just gives you a heads up for where we are at the moment. There's much more detail in the appendices. I'm not proposing to go into any more detail at this point, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. Could I just ask you for a point of clarification? Paragraph 7.16 on page 38. It says that a total of 313 recommendations have been made. Is that this year or is that last year?
That's
so it's just a question of dates.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. That's in relation to the 17 final audit reports that we've completed this year, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from members? Right, well,
not so much.
Sorry,
question,
yeah,
not so much question, Chairman, at this stage. But just, I mean, we did cover much of this at our recent training.
Right.
I suppose it is a question that that in line with, for instance, with Angela's report, which is again accepted as good, and for the second or third or fourth year, however many. But that's heartening, of course, and that won't have any requirement for any further work, probably for some time. But I suppose it's incumbent really on Kerry to choose the areas and choose them carefully. Choose them carefully as to what she has to do, mindful of the fact that we could be in for a bounce at any time. And so it's much the same as the Angela's Obituaries report, in that, you know, all the groundwork is in there, and the concentration has to be in the areas which Kerry deems to be the most vulnerable. It just bothers me slightly, and I don't know what Richard Percival's going to say, if at all, is how we manage to maintain the confidence of the external auditors in these extraordinary circumstances. Other than that, Chairman, I'd say another excellent report from Kerry. Whilst I'm at it, if you wish, I'll move all the recommendations I set out in 2A, B and C.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Yoan Jones wishes to speak. Yoan?
Yeah, thank you. Yoan Jones. Kerry's, I'm glad you raised the issue at 717, because it's the thing I'd highlighted. There's two there, leisure services and the Theatre 7. Your recommendations were supposed to be implemented by dates which have gone past. Have they been implemented? And if not, would it be possible to get the portfolio holder, because they're both under the same portfolio, to come to the next audit committee and explain why?
Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. I'm not able personally to confirm whether or not they've been implemented at this stage, because obviously the audit work we did highlighted the issues, and I passed that to you as members to decide. But within your terms of reference, you can ask the portfolio holders and the relevant officers to attend audit committee. So I'll pass that back to the chair and yourselves to decide that one.
Okay. Can I take those before we take the votes, because I've got other things in that area to look at, and we can accommodate that if necessary. Okay. Could I just say to Kerry, looking on page 40 at 7.19, we have a fairly new section there, which is showing where audit has added value to work for the council. Could you possibly go into a bit into the background of the thinking behind that section?
Thank you, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. As well as the planned audit work, sometimes we're asked to facilitate what we would call consultancy or advice and respond quickly to issues. So what we do is we record the time that we spend on these, because it also, one, I have to ensure that we're not infringing on our independence, but two, the other thing it enables us to do is help the businesses building controls and counter fraud measures before, as they're designing their systems and implementing them, to ensure that they work effectively and efficiently going forward. So, for instance, with the digital mailroom, that's something that IT had to turn around very quickly and have done a very good job on. And at the same time, we were helping advise them which controls they needed to think about and areas of the business where they might have an impact if they did things in a certain way. So we can bring that corporate knowledge to a situation. So it's those types of things, Chair, that we get involved in and we highlight in this paragraph for you.
Okay, thank you. Going back to what we said about with Johan, Councillor Brian Williams, who's given his apologies today, has asked us to look at the question of whether, if there is a fundamental problem with a department identified by the head of audit, should they be brought consistently before the committee? Now, some of these will be fairly short term. Something went specifically wrong and they've been fixed. So in which case we can look at the incident and say, well, it's finished. But some are long-term problems that may take some time or many months for the situation to be recovered. And what Councillor Williams was saying, would the committee want myself as chairman and the head of audit to look at these and decide whether we need to get the responsible managers and portfolio holders to come to the committee at set times, or would the committee want to do it themselves at a committee meeting? Say we've got four fundamental problem recommendations, and that the committee decide who they would want to come and see them in the future. So there is that. Now, we've got four at the moment, and they're on page 38 and 39. Now, Councillor Williams was proposing, if he'd been here, would propose that the pensions payroll interfacing thing he would like it to come before us at the first meeting in the new year. So I'm in your hands into that. And then you have the other three things there where Johan, did I get it right? You've come up with the leisure service contract and the Theatre 7. Am I right on that? But the main thing is, if there's a fundamental weakness, do the committee want myself and the head of audit to see who we would like to come before us, if anybody, or would the committee like to decide that themselves at a committee meeting and decide that whoever it is will come to the next one or the one after? So I've got Johan wishes to speak on that at the moment. So thank you, Johan.
Yes. I think we have a line put down by internal audit by implementation date. if their recommendation hasn't been implemented by that date, I think that is when we should be looking at calling the portfolio holder or officer into the audit committee to explain the reasons why. I don't think we should just manufacture a date. The Schools of Settled Audit have set a date for it being implemented. I think we should be advised and go with that date. And if it's not done by then have a look at it.
Okay, right. Can I ask the head of audits? Just take one at random. We've got the Theatre 7 one here, and I've taken that at random. It's not specific to that. It said in Johan's phrase that they've given a date which is now in the past. Would it be better if when we made a recommendation for a fundamental where you've got a fundamental problem, that you said they then say they will fix it, say by May, and that we then also ask them to get back to you to say that they have done it or not done it, as the case may be, so that information can be fed back on a timely basis to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. The process for fundamental recommendations is, well, any recommendation, the management decide when they're going to implement it. So we highlight the risk and the improvement that's required. We have those discussions with managers. They agree to that risk. They then advise what they can do to improve that internal control, and they set the date. So that date is very much set by the business, knowing its full resources. In terms of follow-up process, we send quarterly to directors a report of all significant and fundamental recommendations, and they should be monitoring these in their own directorates regardless, but we send it as a memo. In terms of the fundamental recommendations, so we assume that the managers are monitoring it, implementing it, because that's what they've signed up to and they're professionally responsible for their areas. What we then do is, where there's a fundamental, we'll follow it up the next year as and when resources allow. So things like COVID at the moment have slipped a few things, and we might be following up a little bit later, but at any point, taking that one, for instance, 6th of May 2020, if you invited the manager from Leisure Services to update you, we could do that virtually before the next meeting and ask them to email and confirm to you the present situation on it, or you could call them into the next meeting and they could confirm where they are. And yes, looking at the date, you would expect that they would have completed that work by now, or have a very clear explanation of what impacted, what changed, and what their new date would be. So it's very much things like COVID do come along and do sometimes upset a plan like any plan. But if it's past the date, members should be able to call in those managers and ask them for that assurance.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Sorry, Chair.
Almost. It's just a question of the committee makes a recommendation, whatever it is, based on your examination of whatever it is, right? So in this case, the theatre. I think the committee would like to know that as a result of your work, the committee's work, and subsequently the management's work, that whatever the problem identified has been resolved. And the thing is, all these things may have been resolved, but we don't know. And I think it's one of those we should know, so that the council itself will then have restored its below par department to what you might call satisfactory level. So sorry, Michael, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, yes, Councillor Michael Wood. Chairman, in the past, we've never been backward and shy in requesting portfolio holders and also the respective senior officers to come to us. And I highlight in that respect, in that context, the digital transformation and also that of highways. And those were almost standing attendances, certainly in the case of digital transformation. But I do understand where Johan's coming from. But I'd like to think that we were maybe in these times when the departments are under some pressure, that maybe we should entrust both yourself and Kerry to filter any such thoughts, any such actions before we actually call them to committee. Where something is clearly of vast importance and great importance to the council, such as digital, I keep going back to digital, but yes, that was of importance, as was highways. Those were standing issues, as to repeat myself. But if we could entrust you and Kerry to filter any such requests, I think that's probably in the current circumstances a better way or a more appropriate way of proceeding. Just again to repeat, I do think these holding to account meetings are good, and I suspect they're something that some of the officers and portfolio holders aren't particularly keen on, but that isn't necessarily the point, of course. So I think, yes, let's do hold people to account. Let's do hold portfolio holders to account. But let's in the first instance do a monitoring and a filtering via yourself and Kerry. I'm sorry if I've repeated myself a little bit, but I think you get where I'm coming from.
That's okay. I want to point out that what we're talking about here is where Kerry has identified a fundamental problem, not just an unsatisfactory one. It's got to be a fundamental one, or we'd be sitting there for hours on end going through God knows how many. And it's on the fundamental ones, which is we're here for governance, where governance has usually failed. And that is something that I think we could take on board. But Kerry wants to come in again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. Just to update you, in terms of the theatre, because the resource pressures, we're unlikely to be reviewing the theatre this financial year, and also they've been closed for a period of time. So it's very much an area we'd need to seek assurance for managers. What I can do with these recommendations is ask managers to respond initially electronically to us, and I can send emails round to everybody about whether they've implemented or not their recommendations, and share that with members to provide management assurance directly to you, and then you can make a decision if that helps. Okay.
So, okay, thank you, Kerry. Michael, was that you?
I just said acceptable, Chairman, Kerry's suggestion.
Okay, so Kerry, can you, for Michelle's purposes, list out as a recommendation what you would want us to do?
Right, thank you, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. For those fundamental recommendations where the data's expired, so Leisure Service Contract June 2020 and Theatre 7 May 2020, I'll write to the managers, email the managers and ask them to provide members with written assurance of where they are in terms of implementing those recommendations, with a view to members assessing if they're satisfied or not with the progress, and then considering any further action.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay for committee members?
Johan Jones here, as
yes.
ideal. Thank you.
Yes, Johan. Sorry.
I said, to me that's ideal. You know, it's
okay.
Yeah.
Jolly good. And I've just got one thing to add from Councillor Williams. He wants oh, hang on, I did write it down, but let me get it back again. He would like a report to the new year, first meeting of the new year, on the pensions payroll interfacing. This is a long-term reform, and I think what he would want to do, what he would want would be an update on where they're going to get themselves out of whatever problems they're in. So could I take it that we agree to that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yes. Okay. Right then. With the extra proposals we've just put, I propose the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Yeah, second that.
Okay, Johan to second. And is anyone objecting to that? Is anyone abstaining? Then the recommendations there are accepted. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kerry. That's a really good report again, or as we expect nothing else, obviously. But I'll catch up with you while we work out the modifications and things for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Our recommendation. Okay, right. We now move on to. Sorry, Johan.
Could I have just a quick one first? Could you just tilt your screen forward a little bit, please? So I lip read to a great extent.
Oh,
now,
right.
if I see a person's lips, I'm lost.
People say when they see my lips moving, they think I'm lying. So,
Is it?
So we're going on to agenda item 9 now, but I can find it. No, I can't find it. Right. Well, let's see what it is. Agenda item 9. Sorry. So this agenda item 9 is a third line assurance, external audit progress report, and sector update. So can the external audit engagement lead introduce herself and present the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's Richard here, Richard Purcell. I'm the Grant Thornton External Audit Engagement Lead.
Right, I'll change that to himself then.
It's fine, it's fine, it's not a problem. I just apologies that we've not produced papers for this meeting, and I'll explain why as we go along. There's 3 things that I'd like us to update the committee on today. The first and foremost is on the progress with the 1920 audit and where we are with the accounts audit, and I'll ask Mary Wren, the audit manager, to talk to that item in a moment. I'd also like to give you a quick briefing on the changes to the value for money approach for next year's audit, for the 2021 audit, because they are significant, and I think it's important the committee are aware of those now. And also a quick view on the Redmond review, which was published last week. I'll say a little bit more about that. But if it's all right with you, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Mary now, just to give you a progress update on the accounts audit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Wren, Grant Thornton, Audit Manager. As Richard said, I'll give you a brief update regarding progress since the last Audit Committee on the 31st of July in relation to the audit. I think it was unclear at the start of the audit process that the impact remote working would actually have on audit delivery. I've now got that benefit of hindsight, and above everything else, I'm thankful that no member of either our team or the council's team have suffered with any sickness levels. So that's of, key importance. Remote working has, however, extended the audit process, and we're seeing this across almost all of our local government audits. It's taken longer to verify, clear down any queries in our virtual world. For example, the use of screen sharing and the quick question where we just go to someone's desk or pop our head around the corner and ask questions. It's just taking much longer to get response via email or arranging meeting times to go through queries. And areas such as physical verification of assets, which is one of the key tests of making sure the assets you say you've got do actually exist. So so there have been just a couple of examples where things are taking longer. So in respect to progress, our last block of work finished on the 14th of August, and at this point we met with the finance team and discussed a way forward to complete outstanding procedures. Now we're very aware that the finance team have got a myriad of responsibilities, and audit is just one of these. And as such, we've agreed a timescale with finance to ensure all outstanding information requests could be provided at a time where we could allocate resource to the audit, but also would fit with the responsibilities of finance too. We're pleased to report that finance team have actually responded to the information request in order to complete the audit, and our team will actually be working through this week commencing the 28th of September, and there will be 3 members of the audit team allocated to your audit to work through that information. And our plan remains to issue your opinion following the audit committee on the 29th of October. Now obviously we don't know what may come out of the rest of the audit, but that is our plan at this point. That was just a brief update. I'm happy to take any questions, and happy to take questions. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. Could I just ask you a general question on general external auditing? You're here to have a look at us, but your company, I assume, is also auditing other councils around the country. Can you tell us? Is this council sort of well up to above average on the way it's conducting itself in the light of the problems that it and other councils are facing at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm just speaking from my experience. I've got three local authority audits, but also from a wider national context. I think one of the key areas where we've found challenge across organisations at different degrees is the remote working technology and access to information. As some authorities have members of staff who, for example, don't have internet access, and these could be key people we need to talk to as part of the accounts process. We've not had issues like that with you, and in particular our key contacts are within the finance team. So from my personal perspective of gathering information for the audit, we haven't had any significant issues from that perspective. I mean, obviously there are wider IT points, but I wouldn't necessarily be cited on those, as our focus is generally the financial statements. But we, compared to other organisations, you know, we've been able to gather the information as we need throughout the audit, so there are no points to raise compared to others on that.
Okay.
If I could, Chair, Richard Purcell, Engagement Lead. As a group of engagement leads, we have weekly meetings for all our local government audits across the Midlands patch to discuss progress. As you're aware, the deadline due to COVID for issuing audit opinions has been pushed back to 30th November. I would say that the council is in the above the median line, if you like, in terms of progress. We've got others that are more advanced than the council's audits, but we're also seeing some audits where that 30th of November deadline is not going to be achievable due to the problems that are having with COVID, and that pattern is repeated across the country, where there will be a significant number of local authority audits that will not make that revised deadline. So our plan, as Mary said, is to achieve that October sign off. If we do that, I will be personally very happy, and the council will be in a good place. So that's a summary of the big picture.
Okay, thank you. What you said, I think it will reassure members of the committee and hopefully members of the council as well. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? No, anyone else got any questions for our auditors?
In which case, Chair, could I move on to my other sort of
Yes.
updates? Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to update you on is on the change to the value for money approach. Members are probably well aware that what we currently do is identify what we call significant value for money risks. We look at those risks and we issue a value for money conclusion. And that value for money conclusion can be an unqualified conclusion, it can be qualified, and we have two subdivisions of that, except for, which means basically everything's all right apart from this issue, or adverse, where we say this is a fundamental governance issue and it permeates widely through the organisation. So all that's changing from the 1st of April 20. So for audits for 2021 onwards, the Code of Audit Practice, which is issued by the National Audit Office, and if you like is our rules of the game, has changed the value for money approach. So what it means now is that we won't issue a value for money conclusion in future. We will for this year's audit, but that will be the last time. From then on, we'll be required to take a different, and I have to say perhaps more intense approach, certainly do more work. So the value for money process will focus on three key areas: financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. The council's arrangements to do that, and we will have to look at all of those areas in quite some depth. So picking up Councillor Wood's point about our confidence, for example, in internal audit and internal audit's finding, that will be key under that governance stream. So the sort of things we'll want to know are what are internal audit finding, what are they recommending, and what's the response to those recommendations. So that conversation that you had about Kerry's plan and how you deal with recommendations, how you make sure they're being implemented, we will be very much focused on you demonstrating to us that you have effective governance arrangements to identify where your weak areas are, identify what you need to do to strengthen those areas, and making sure that you are taking those actions. That's a for example, and clearly there'll be similar things in terms of understanding your financial sustainability in the medium term, which obviously we look at the moment, but we'll look at in even more detail, and your arrangements for delivering improvements to your value for money. So how you identify how you're going to improve the efficiency of your services, how you identify the effectiveness of your services and what you need to do, and how you can get the best bang for your buck in terms of economy. So the sort of thinking behind this is about promoting timely reporting on the big issues affecting the council, and the auditor providing more accessible and meaningful reporting. I think it's generally accepted that our current arrangements that we're required to go through don't actually contribute an awful lot to the clarity of what we're expecting councils to do. So there'll be much more of a responsibility on us to make very clear recommendations for improvement and make sure that the council is implementing those recommendations. You'll also be used to us producing an annual audit letter, which we'll do again this year for the last time. Now, the annual audit letter is essentially a cut down of the audit findings report, which this committee sees anyway. So it's a bit of duplicate effort, whereas the auditor's annual report that we'll be required to give will be something different. It will be a commentary on the work that we've carried out in terms of value for money. It will clearly identify any areas of weakness that we've identified and identify and summarise our recommendations. We'll be required to publish that by the 30th of September, but ideally when we issue the audit opinion. So that will be quite a different shift for us, because currently the annual audit letter comes out sometimes afterwards. I mean, I think in summary, what this actually means for us and why it's important for the committee to be aware of this, apart from the obvious changes, is one, it's going to require more work from us, but it's also going to require a richer skill mix in terms of the delivery of that work. So all that adds up to additional cost. So there will be a fee variation associated with this work, and at first instance I'll discuss that with James as a Section 151 officer, but it will be a significant fee variation, as it will be at all audits. So you need to be aware of that now. And when we've got numbers on the table, clearly we'll discuss that with the committee. I'm not currently sure whether this process is going to be dealt with through public sector audit appointment. My anticipation is it will be done on an authority by authority basis, but we are trying to get some movement from PSAA to have more of a sector-wide approach to this. So that was all I was going to say about value for money. And before I talk about the Redmond review, I'll just pause, Chair, if members have any questions.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Could I just ask one?
Yes, certainly.
So I just ask one. I assume that with all these changes that are coming on, that are being put through, that the head of audit will be kept right up to speed with exactly what you need, with the change of emphasis and the changes of work practices that are needed, so that she can smoothly move on to the new system.
Yes, I mean in terms of the head of audit's plan, and in terms of the head of audit's responsibility, there are no changes to that, and there won't be fundamental changes to the way that we interface with the head of audit, in as much as we already clearly communicate with each other and make sure that we know where each other are at. I think what Kerry will see from us is perhaps a more focused interest and review of those larger audits that she carries out, where there identify weaknesses that you or we feel to be significant, to understand why those weaknesses have occurred in the first place, and whether the actions that are being agreed are both appropriate and effective.
Okay, thank you. Kerry has indicated she wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Kerry Plasky, Head of Audit. Thank you, Richard. Just to reassure members that we've seen the consultation documents on this, and through James's finance management team, we're actually working on the types of evidence and starting to think around the types of evidence that Richard and the team will need on this. So we are cited on this, and those conversations with the external auditors are ongoing.
Okay, thank you, Kerry.
Chairman, Richard, thank you very much for that. Councillor Michael Wood, just sort of as a bit of background, do these new auditing requirements, have they come from SIPRA, or have they come from government? And of course, then the knock-on is, of course, is that, to use your words, a significant increase in audit fees. I'm just bothered that whereas we used to have a little bit of a joke about the annual audit fee exchange, especially with Grant, and it was light-hearted, of course, but what does significant mean, and where does this come from? To say, is it SIPRA or is it from government? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wood. Richard Percival, engagement lead again. In terms of where it's come from, I think the fundamental source is a sector awareness of the limitations of the current system and the need to improve it. To go back into history, members may well remember that when the Audit Commission had a very broad remit in terms of value for money at one time, and when the Audit Commission was abolished, that remit was reduced very much, and what there has been a recognition of is the need not to go back to the Audit Commission type remit, but to have a more perhaps a more expansive, but certainly a more citizen-focused, if you like, remit that actually makes sense to people in terms of what is the auditor looking at and what is saying. In terms of the source of that, I think that two key sources are government and through the National Audit Office and the advice that the National Audit Office provide to government as because they are required to lay the code of audit practice before Parliament. So certainly the National Audit Office, but key players in the sector. There's been a consultation process, so SIPFA have been involved in that consultation process and commented on it, and are supportive of these changes, and local authorities themselves. So there's been quite a broad consensus about the need for change, but certainly the National Audit Office in their role as the purveyors of the Code of Audit Practice have been very much the drivers for this. Okay. Oh, and then sorry, Joe, if I may. In terms of significant, I'm not going to provide a quantification of the figure at the moment, because that figure will be subject to discussion, and I also need to do and make sure we do a clear costing of the inputs that were required for the exercise when we know more about the extent of the work that we need to do. So it will be premature for me to give a number, but it is going to be it's not going to be a minor number. It's not going to be a couple of thousand on top of the audit fee. It'll be more than that.
Okay.
Forewarned, forearmed.
Exactly.
It's
that's what I'm trying to do.
Nobody any good.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Would you like to go on to your next section?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So finally, I'd like to talk briefly about the Redmond review to you. I will provide the committee with a briefing pack for the next meeting on the Redmond review, but given that it sort of links into what I've just said about value for money, I thought it was timely to talk to the committee about this. So Tony Redmond's review was published last week on the 8th of September into local government audit and financial reporting. His purpose was to assess the effectiveness of audit in local authorities and look at the transparency of financial reporting. And he's made some very interesting recommendations and I think some very pertinent and fundamental findings about where we are at the moment. And his basic conclusion is that the current system for local authority auditing and financial reporting is not working. The arrangements that were envisaged in the 2014 Local Audit and Accountability Act have not, in fact, materialised. There's a concern about a lack of coherence in the system. For instance, we have PSAA involved in the system, we have the National Audit Office involved in the system, MHCLG, SIPFA. So we have a number of stakeholders before we actually get to the key stakeholders, which are the local authorities themselves. So the waters are very confused. The local audit market is extremely fragile. I know previously when I talked about changes to fee with the committee, there is a dearth of the skills required to deliver focused public audit, and the fee structure as it currently is doesn't support the development of the public audit profession. And there is the risk, the real and imminent risk, that suppliers will withdraw from the market because the risks and rewards in the market are not commensurate. So there's an urgent need for action to be taken to address these points. So Tony's made about 10 or 12 recommendations, and really I'd just summarise those under 5 headings. The first recommendation is about a new regulator, the Office for Local Audit and Regulation. So that would replace the Financial Reporting Council and Public Sector Audit appointments. Members will be aware that repeatedly in our audit we talk about property, plant and equipment valuations and about pension liabilities. Our regulators currently with FRC, and they are extremely focused on those large estimates in the accounts. it is a moot point whether our focus on those items in the account actually add an awful lot to the review of the financial stewardship of the authority informing our conclusion. So we very much welcome the setting up of this new regulator with a focus on the needs of local authority accounting. I'd really emphasise at this point, it's not a new audit commission. It's a much smaller body with a much tighter remit around audit appointment and regulation. I think, picking up Councillor Wood's point about being forewarned, I think the second point is about fees. It's pretty clear that the current fee structure doesn't work and is broken, which is why I keep having repeated discussions with you about our need to put the fees up, and that we need to be able to deploy effective and appropriate and adequate resource to deliver the requirements to provide the audits that local authorities need, and that feedback was consistent across all providers. I think the other thing that isn't helpful is where the deadline's been moved to the 31st of July before we got hit by COVID, and Sir Tony's recommended it goes back to 30th of September so that audit suppliers can actually manage that workload effectively. The other things that is important is about account simplification. So currently the accounts that you receive are very complex. They're complex to a qualified accountant to understand. So the recommendation is that there is a summary that is in much plainer English that is provided and published, and that summary is audited by your external auditors. So unlike any summary statements that you may produce now, there's actually an audit requirement to ensure it's consistent and there's appropriate disclosure. And I think the other sort of key area is on audit reporting. So the proposal is that the auditor's annual report that I've talked about will be something that went to full council. That although the audit committee would still have its current remit, we as your external auditors would have a direct line into full council to report the outcomes of our audit every year. I mean, that's a very brief summary of Sir Tony's report, and I mean, I think it goes without saying that as the major audit provider in the market, we welcome this report. We think it's, in terms of improving public accountability and improving our own accountability on the things that matter, it's a really positive move. And as I say, I will provide a more detailed briefing paper for members for the next meeting. But that was all I was going to say, Chair, but I'm very happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, thank you. Michael wishes to speak. Michael, Councillor Wood.
Oh, thank you, Richard, for that latter piece. I think that many of us in local government would absolutely welcome shorter reports, and I know that an external body that I sit on, we regularly see sort of 300 or 400 pages. Whoever analyses that lot, it's always been a mystery to me, and have called always for probably half a dozen pages of explanation to whichever body it may be. And then the body of the report being available, say, online for anyone who wishes to delve into it further. Of course, there are the cynics amongst us, of course. I don't think I'm one of them, but you could say that if you want to hide something away, back on page 352 is a very good place to put it, because no one will ever reach it. So it's a two-edged sword. This is. It certainly will. The abbreviated version will certainly help councillors, never mind members of the public who may wish to seek to go into any of that kind of information. I suspect that audits of councils and audits of other public bodies are probably something that you use to get to sleep at night. But I do welcome that selection, that new process. It can only be good. Whether it costs us more Of course, it sounds as though it's going to cost us significantly more to get to that position, but I think that most of us, councillors and members of the public and other people who are interested, would only welcome it. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll back Councillor Woods there. Google, apparently its terms and conditions at one stage ran to over 700 pages, and on about page 695 it had a thing there said, if you're reading this, phone this number and claim your $10,000. And after about 15 years, only one person had ever done so. So too much data as opposed to information is not good. Can I just ask you? The general thing is, you're saying that there is a general lack of skills about. Now, is that on your side and the expertise you can call on, or does some of that apply to within councils? And I don't necessarily mean Shropshire Council, but this lack of skills. So where is it basically?
So it's in the audit world as opposed to the accounting world that Sir Tony's pointing to. And to put that into context, there are across the UK, there are currently something like 96 individuals that are what we call key account partners. So they're engagement leads, like myself, that have, if you like, the authority to issue an audit opinion on a local authority. But because suppliers have withdrawn from that market, I think there are 63 people in the country that can sign off local authority accounts. Now, without being too vain about it, I'm sure you can tell by looking at me that I am not 25, and a lot of my colleagues are of in a similar age group to me. So there is over the next few years, there is going to be a significant proportion of those 63 people are going to retire. Now, the other end of the spectrum is making public audit an attractive option for people, for the sort of quality of people that we need to do this work, is quite challenging in the current world. But where we're moving to, where Redmond moves us to, where VFM moves us to, is a much sharper focus on where I would argue we used to be, and that's on public accountability and our role in public accountability, which I think makes the career more attractive to people. But so that's the issue about skills, Chair. It's about that, it's about that and recognition that the skill set you need to audit a set of local authority accounts is not the skill set you need to audit a set of corporate accounts. They are different in nature, and you need different skills. Okay,
thanks very much.
Okay.
Right, any more questions for our external auditors? No, right. So I propose that we note the reports we've had, and I'll propose that. Does anyone second it?
Councillor Michael Woods to second.
Okay, does anyone object? Anyone abstain? No, okay, then they're accepted. And can I say thank you to external auditors for their presence and their contribution. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, we now go on to item 10, which is the date and time of the next meeting, which I'm told is going to be on the 29th of October 2020 at 1:30 p.m. Whether it's a physical meeting or a remote meeting, I think remains to be seen. So we'll learn that in time. Okay, thank you. We now come to item 11, which involves the exclusion of the press and public. So what I move from the chair that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4(3) of the Council's Access to Information Procedure Rules, the public and press be excluded for the consideration of the remaining of the business. And we'll now take a vote. So I will go with that. Michael?
Agreed.
Agreed. Johan?
Agreed.
Okay, and oh dear, my brain's gone.
Gerald agreed.
Yes, it's Gerald. Sorry, yes. You agree? Okay, right. So can we, Michelle? Can you tell us when we can continue?